All right, so get ready to dive deep into a book that really just like messed with my head in the best way possible. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. You know that guy who writes those like mind-bending thrillers? I'm still trying to wrap my head around like all the twists and turns.
Oh, Crouch is a master at that for sure. He blends science fiction with these like human dilemmas that everybody has, and Dark Matter is no exception to that. It's like it's a wonderful life, but with a sci-fi twist and like a wild ride through the multiverse.
Exactly. It's one of those stories that really stays with you long after you finish reading it. And I think it's super cool because it makes you think about the choices you make
Yeah.
and how those choices really shape who you become.
Yeah, it's definitely a what if kind of book. Like, what if you could see all the different paths your life could have taken? And what if some of those paths led to, like, well, let's just say things got pretty intense for Jason Dessen, our main character.
Intense is an understatement, for sure. One minute he's just this normal physics professor living in Chicago, happily married with a son, and the next he's like abducted and thrown into this totally different reality.
Yeah, the way Crouch just like drops you into that alternate reality with Jason is brilliant.
Yeah.
You're just as disoriented as he is, trying to figure out what is real and what is not. It's like walking into a mirror maze, but all the reflections are like different versions of your life.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the plot itself,
Hmm.
let's talk about some of the themes that really stand out in this book. First, there's like this whole idea of choices and consequences,
Right.
something I think we can all relate to on some level. Like Jason's decision to prioritize his family over his career ambitions. Well, that sets off this whole chain reaction, which throws him into the multiverse.
Exactly, and that's where it gets really, really interesting. Crouch uses this idea of the multiverse to explore the butterfly effect, like how even the tiniest choices can just have these huge consequences, creating entirely different timelines. It's kind of like those choose your own adventure books, but with a huge dose of existential dread.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really makes you think about all those paths not taken in your own life.
Mhm.
Like, what if I had chosen that other job or moved to a different city? Would I even be the same person?
For sure. It's like it's both fascinating and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
And Crouch uses this really clever analogy in the book to explain the multiverse. He compares it to a fish in a pond. So the fish is only aware of its own little world, but there could be this whole universe outside that pond that it doesn't even know exists.
I love that analogy. It makes this whole idea of multiple dimensions a little easier to grasp. And speaking of grasping things, let's talk about this concept of identity, which plays a huge role in Dark Matter. As Jason encounters all these different versions of himself, he's forced to really confront this question of what truly defines a person. Is it your memories, your experiences, or your relationships?
Yeah, it's deep.
It's a question that really resonated with me.
It really makes you wonder, like if you strip away all that external stuff, all the stuff that happens to you, what's really left at the core of who you are? I think that's the brilliance of Dark Matter. It takes these complex scientific ideas and uses them to explore some really fundamental questions about human nature.
Okay, so we've got choices and consequences, we've got the multiverse, and this idea of identity.
Hmm.
But we can't forget about the emotional core of the story. Love and family. The lengths that Jason goes to be reunited with his wife, Daniela, and his son, Charlie. It's mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It just shows you the incredible power of love
Yeah.
and the sacrifices we're willing to make for the people we care about most.
Totally. You could throw Jason into any reality, no matter how bizarre or terrifying, and he will always find a way to get back to his family. That unwavering love is really what drives him forward through all the chaos.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the major themes, but I think it's time to really get into the nitty-gritty of the plot. Are you ready to unpack some serious twists and turns?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm still processing that whole box situation. A device that lets you jump between different realities. Whoa. The implications are just mind-blowing.
And the way Crouch slowly reveals the secrets of the box, it keeps you guessing the whole time. Like, what is it really? And who created it? It's masterful. It's like he's peeling back the layers of an onion, and every layer reveals a new twist. And that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Yeah. So good. Oh, and we can't forget about all those different realities that Jason visits. Talk about a visual feast. Crouch paints these really vivid, sometimes terrifying pictures of worlds that are like familiar but also utterly alien.
Oh, yeah, like that ash-covered world where everything is blanketed in this like gray ash
Yeah.
and people are just struggling to survive. Or that frozen world where everything is encased in ice and the air is so cold it hurts to breathe.
Yeah.
Like he took our world and twisted it into these like nightmarish versions of itself.
Yeah, and each reality that Jason lands in forces him to confront like different aspects of his own identity. It's like each world is a mirror, reflecting back a different version of who he could have been.
Right. Like that reality where he's this famous painter, something he always dreamed of being, but gave up to be with Daniela. You could just see the regret and longing in his eyes as he experiences that life, even though it's not really his.
Oh, yeah, totally. And that's what makes it so heartbreaking. He gets a taste of these other lives, but they all ultimately feel empty because he's missing the one thing that really matters to him, his family. It's like he's constantly being pulled in these two different directions, the allure of like the path not taken, and then the unwavering love for his wife and son.
Exactly.
And that tension just keeps building and building as he encounters all these alternate versions of himself. Some of them are helpful, but some of them are straight up menacing. The stakes just get higher with every jump, and the threat to Daniela and Charlie becomes almost unbearable.
Okay, can we talk about that abandoned power plant showdown for a minute?
Okay.
'Cause, whoa, talk about intense. Dozens of Jasons,
Mhm.
all fighting for control of the box, each one desperate to claim the life they believe is rightfully theirs. It's chaotic, it's terrifying, and it's just brilliant storytelling.
It really is. It's like all those choices and consequences, all those different paths, they all converge at that power plant. It's like a culmination of everything that we've been talking about, the nature of reality, the fragility of identity, and the lengths that we'll go to for the people we love. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And in the midst of all that chaos, you have Jason 2, the other Jason, the one who built the box. And his motivation is so complex.
It really is.
He's driven by this intense yearning for a life that he believes was stolen from him.
Right. He's totally consumed by that grass is always greener mentality, but on a multiversal scale.
Right.
Like he thinks he's entitled to Jason 1's life, even if it means erasing everything that Jason 1 holds dear. It raises all these ethical questions about manipulating reality and the consequences of trying to control fate.
Exactly. It makes you think about like the limits of ambition and the dangers of chasing what might have been instead of appreciating what you already have.
For sure.
And what's really interesting is that Crouch doesn't really paint Jason 2 as a straight up villain.
Right.
He's more like a cautionary tale, a glimpse into what Jason 1 could become if he gives in to all of his regrets and desires.
Totally.
I also thought Amanda Lucas was a really fascinating character. At first, she's just this scientist working on the box. But her role evolves in such a cool way.
Yeah, she does.
She becomes this unlikely ally to Jason,
Yeah.
helping him navigate the complexities of the multiverse.
Right.
She's like a grounding force amidst all the chaos,
Yeah.
representing reason and logic amidst all the emotional turmoil. And her connection with Jason just adds this whole other layer to the story.
For sure.
It's not just about romantic love. It's about the bonds that we forge with people in really unexpected circumstances.
Totally.
So I have to know, did you ever pick a side? Team Jason 1 or Team Jason 2? I mean, I know they're technically the same person, but their choices and their motivations are so different.
That's a good question. Honestly, I think it's less about picking a side and more about understanding the complexity of their situation. Jason 1 represents the path of love and family, choosing connection over ambition. And then Jason 2 represents the allure of what might have been, like the relentless pursuit of personal fulfillment, even if it means hurting other people. They both embody different aspects of the human experience, different ways of grappling with choices and consequences.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. It's like they're two sides of the same coin, each representing a different path that we could take in our own lives.
Yeah.
And the fact that Crouch doesn't really offer a clear resolution, a definite winner. It just adds to the book's thought-provoking nature.
Absolutely. The ending leaves you with way more questions than answers. It's like he's saying, hey, I've given you the tools to think about all these big questions. Now you figure it out.
Which is perfect for our deep dive, right? That's exactly what we're trying to do here. Delve into these complex ideas and see what we uncover. So before we get to the ending, and trust me, we need to talk about that final twist. What stood out to you most about Dark Matter? What really resonated with you on a personal level?
I think for me, it was really that feeling of what if that Crouch just nails? It's like he tapped into this like universal fear we all have of making the wrong choice, of missing out on some other version of ourselves that might be happier or more successful or whatever. It makes you question your own path and wonder if you're really living the life you're meant to live.
Totally. It's like that age-old question of nature versus nurture. Like how much of who we are is already predetermined and how much is shaped by the choices we make. And Dark Matter just takes that question and throws it into a blender with quantum physics and alternate dimensions.
And it's not just about the big choices either, right? It's the small ones too, the ones that seem insignificant at the time, but that could actually send you spiraling off. in a completely different reality. It's kind of mind-blowing, but also terrifying. Oh yeah, for sure. It makes you realize that even the most ordinary day could be a turning point, a fork in the road that leads to like an infinite number of possibilities. And that kind of brings us to the ending, which, let's be honest, left us all with our jaws on the floor. No spoilers, but that final twist. Still not sure what to make of it.
I know, right? Just when you think everything is resolved, Crouch throws in this curveball
Yeah.
that makes you question everything you thought you knew. It's genius,
Yeah.
but also kind of frustrating because it doesn't give you all the answers. It's like he wants you to keep thinking about it, to keep wrestling with the implications.
Right. And that's the sign of a truly great book, isn't it? It sticks with you long after you finish reading it. It sparks all these conversations and makes you want to dive deep into these big questions about life, about choices and the nature of reality.
Yeah, totally. And I think the ending also really highlights this idea that reality is subjective. Like what's real for one Jason might not be real for another. It all depends on their own perceptions and experiences. It's like he's saying there's no one true reality, just a whole bunch of possibilities, all existing at the same time.
It's kind of like those optical illusions where you see one thing and then suddenly your perspective shifts and you see something completely different. Dark matter does that, but on a cosmic scale. It forces you to question all your own assumptions about what's real and what's not.
So here's the big question. If you could step into that box and choose a different path, would you? And if so, what path would you choose?
Oh, that is a tough one. I think the temptation to explore all those what ifs would be huge, to see what your life could have been like if you had made different choices. But I think the book also shows us the dangers of getting too caught up in those alternate realities. You might lose sight of what truly matters, the connections, the love, the experiences, the stuff that makes up the life you're already living.
It's like you said earlier, the journey is just as important as the destination. And maybe that's like the biggest takeaway from Dark Matter, to embrace the choices we've made, both the big ones and the small ones, and to find meaning in the reality we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, I love that.
I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Dark Matter. We've covered a lot of ground today, from choices and consequences to the multiverse and the nature of identity. But I think most importantly, we've really had a chance to think about the book's message and how it connects to our own lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And if this deep dive has left you with more questions than answers, well, that's a good thing. It means the book has done its job. It sparked your curiosity, challenged your assumptions, and maybe even made you look at the world a little differently.
Absolutely.
So if you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out Dark Matter. It's a wild, thought-provoking ride, and it'll definitely stick with you long after you turn the last page.
Couldn't agree more.
And until next time, keep exploring those infinite possibilities